An easy writing mistake to make when writing arcs is to accidentally trivialize past scenes and episodes due to either rushing the process of the arc or having the characters ignore the journey they had to go through to get to the destination that they are currently at, and Vivian made both of these mistakes with how Stolas was handled. The last time these two were in an episode together was back in Apology Tour, and it was not looking good for either of them, but that episode at least added consequences to the actions of Stolas and Blitz, finally making this series-long romance of theirs feel like it was going somewhere. But now, in Mastermind, almost all of that development was completely abandoned due to the plot forcing these characters into overriding the lessons and consequences that Apology Tour established. Stolas finally left Blitz behind and fell out of love with him, only for something as extreme as Blitz about to be executed to force him to reconcile with Blitz, while Blitz, who has come to terms with his feelings for Stolas now, is served Stolas on a silver platter since Stolas has no home or anyone but Blitz to turn to for support. Blitz did not earn this. He did nothing in Apology Tour, Ghost Effers, or Mastermind to show that he deserves to have Stolas back in his life again, but because of lazy writing, he gets to have exactly what he wants with no effort or redemption on his part to have Stolas in an extremely vulnerable position that he can take advantage of. As for Stolas, I believe it was in character for him to save Blitz, as even though he doesn't, or should I say shouldn't, love him, he's not heartless enough to let Blitz die for a crime that was partially his fault. That is not who Stolas is, and turning to Blitz for support in the end makes sense as he literally has no other option, but I wish with how things left off in Apology Tour he would at least set up some boundaries to show that he hasn't forgiven Blitz, and they can't pretend like the events of Full Moon and Apology Tour didn't happen. But instead, we get the ending sequence, which has been labeled by just about everyone as something that came straight out of a fan fiction. I never really wanted to agree with this assessment, but yeah, there is no denying that Blitz and Stolas going from being officially broken up and trying to move on with their lives, to Blitz bathing Stolas and kissing him on the cheek as he falls asleep, is just way too clean and sudden for it to even be believable. As I said, Stolas should have set up some boundaries. There should have been some discussion on the state of their relationship, and Blitz should at least respect Stolas enough by this point not to kiss him on the cheek while he's sleeping. I know these two both confess their love for each other back during the song, but just because they both know each party cares for one another doesn't just make the entire conflict these two have been having the entire series fall into irrelevancy. Or at least that would have been the case if Vivian was better at riding the ship, but instead, we get the least interesting and unearned ending for these two that I could only imagine would be satisfying for those who only care about the final result and think imperfections in a relationship would ruin the vibe, instead of adding complexity to said relationship. And complexity is seemingly something that not just Helluva Boss as a whole, but Mastermind specifically lacks, as although you don't need complexity to make emotional stakes effective, the skill in which you write emotional moments whilst accounting for what your audience is willing to believe and be invested in can be very complex, and Mastermind's climax is what failing to do so looks like. This entire episode felt like it was building up to a big climax, and this scene ended up being the execution scene, which should have felt like the most tense and emotional moment in Mastermind, and yes, Blitzel saying he loves his new adopted family was heartfelt, but it all rings hollow as this isn't even the finale of the season, and Helluva Boss expects us to be invested in the potential death of the main character of the show. I know that there are times when you simply just have to suspend your disbelief, but come on, did anyone actually think that Blitz would die in this episode? The execution scene was just too overdramatic for it to work, and what really ruined the tension of this scene is that there is a brief moment where we see Stolas leave his home to stop the execution, so we already know that Stolas is going to come to save Blitz. At the very least, if they had shown that Stolas moment, the viewer could have been invested in what is going to happen to get Blitz out of this situation, but unfortunately, that wasn't the decision that was made. Instead, we get a scene that relies on tension to work, and it didn't. There was potential here as the idea of Blitz facing consequences for his actions could have had some actual stakes if it wasn't written to be so overdramatic. If instead of being killed, his punishment had been him having his horns or tail cut off, that